I'm going to introduce the next two presenters, Hazel and Helen Martin. They've worked in the area of multimedia, and I think they're going to give us a practice view on and also see how it can enhance the learning for their students. Over to you.
Thank you. Today what we're going to be doing is hopefully giving you a fairly visual presentation that will encourage you to go and find our full paper online. We've used the CloudWorks that have been set up as part of Dean's and put all the links. This is up on SlideShare. The full paper is up on Scribed, and there's also a neat handout with a whole load of resources if you're interested in using multimedia in various ways.
So what we're going to be looking at is the benefits of using multimedia education, and I think the most useful part of this presentation is going to be the case studies where we show how it happens in action, and also some caveats at the end, some of the things that perhaps don't always go quite as well as we would hope they would. So this is poor old Lucas. It could even be my 17-year-old grandson. He's one of my Facebook friends. I said to him a couple of weeks ago, Eddie, he'd just been telling me how he's been signed to a record company, not that I'm showing off, but he has, and he's also an artist. And I said, Eddie, what use do you make of computers at school? He's in the 7th form. He said, oh, you know, online learning I'm talking about. He said, oh, we went to the computer room once in maths and we worked out a problem and then we emailed it to our friends. And this is a guy who's at a school in Auckland which is supposed to be forward thinking. So while we've got the sort of work that Mike's doing down one end of the spectrum, at the other end of the spectrum I think there's a bit of a lag. And so while we're talking about Eddie is at a face-to-face high school, it's equally applicable to the online stuff.
So just thinking about sort of the power of stories and anecdote, here we've got a little lad called Source. Source is at Maharani College up in Warkworth. We've just done a week proof of concept trial there. Now Source have been kind of labelled as disengaged. He was often truant. He really upset the other students. Part of this trial was to use multimedia, was to use things like Adobe Connect and have the students come online, get to know other students in other schools from all around New Zealand, and they're all learning English together. He has emigrated with his family from Kiribati recently. So a lot of anxieties there. So it's kind of like your worst nightmare as a teacher. What we found with Source is all of a sudden there was time for him to think. There were things to keep him engaged. He started getting to know the other students in the other schools and started to really practice some of the social interactions. So Source was kind of like a success story, and we wanted to start with just a bit of a success story to motivate people to perhaps follow on in this line.
So when we talk about quality connections and boundless possibilities, and I really liked your talk, Terry, this morning, the idea of connectivity, because that's really what we're on about. We're talking about things like cultural appropriacy, fostering creativity through open learning, catering to different learning styles, and enhancing accessibility to people, ideas, and in fact the world, opening things up.
So this is slightly misleading. The reason that we chose this slide was HTML, Web 1, sort of information, multimedia is pushed out to learners. What we really want to focus on and have been focusing on in the case studies that we're going to talk about is Web 2 type ethos. It's connectivity. It's students creating their own content, sharing it with their peers, getting feedback. Also having that out there and other people appropriating that content, changing it and taking it with them. This is quite a nice example of that. This is from the UK. It's a school there. Students have been making things like claymations. They've been making their own little videos. They've been using things like their mobile phones to do the videoing. The school, and there's actually the URL up here, Lent Rise School, has provided this platform for the students to put their videos up, and it's open, and you can see here from the comments Some are from classmates, but some are actually from students from other parts of the world. And just reading a little bit behind this project, the students find it incredibly motivating because they've got an authentic audience. So what do we mean by multimedia? It's all of these things. It's text, it's audio, it's diagrams, it's data. However, what we wanted to really focus on today is the combination of at least two modes of multimedia. So it could be video and audio, or video and text. So yeah, just to sort of pull it into perspective there.
Always the problems with technology, but not an excuse, because it can always be got around some way. And the benefits include, more of the benefits include things like flexible working methods, which you probably all know about, social networking. And the big one, I think, is the idea of citizenship. We've been so marketised globally, everything is for sale, everything is a commodity. And I think this is, gives us more of a view into what democracy could really look like and what citizenship could actually be when people can take control of their own learning processes. Yeah, this one, quite like it, although the internet tells people how to make bombs, doesn't it? So that's one of the negatives, you know, when people like to get into negatives about it. But through these tools, students can do things in a way that captures them, that may not have ignited them in a sort of a text-based situation. So, for example, demonstrations. We saw yesterday a student taught herself how to play the piano from looking at YouTube through the correspondence or gift of a computer. They can get into narratives and storytelling, and they can understand abstract ideas through the visual in a way that is really enabling.
So I'm not going to go into cognitive theory because it's all in the paper, but what I really wanted to do is just say there's a lot of theory underpinning what we've been doing, and just give a short example. So if you imagine in the way your brain works, it's like having two tunnels that go through to a network in your brain. The two tunnels, one will cope with audio and visual, and the other one with things like reading. Which means if you put a PowerPoint up and it's got bullet points and lots of text, your audience is either reading off the PowerPoint or they're listening to you. It is not physically possible to do both at the same time. PowerPoints with bullets are fantastic maybe as a memory jogger after your presentation, but if you put visuals up, it means that you're actually getting your audience's brain to really click into action. You're looking at the colours, the shapes, your emotions are engaged, your limbic system. The visuals are much more powerful as an engagement tool and encouraging your students to really start to get hold of the concepts. So thinking about the research, again, why would you want to do this? There's been quite a few meta-studies, there's quite a few reports. The one that I'm going to refer to here is Cisco. They brought out a report in 2008 that was looking at multimedia. They did recognise there was significant improvements in learning outcomes when multimedia was used. However, they did say that the research at the moment isn't defining what sort of multimedia is most effective. So there's actually room for more research there. But they did emphasise the need for really good design around the use of multimedia.
It's a shame that you can't get the full impact of that visual, because it's a gorgeous pic of an internet and taco joint in Mexico. And I just love that because it shows that what used to be something amazing and special is now ubiquitous and banal. So you can go in and check in on your email while you're ordering your tacos. So what we're doing next is we're going to be looking at the case studies, talking about learning preferences, talking a little bit about some of the theory.
And we'll also just give you a couple more examples of why you might want to use multimedia.
So when you're designing learning programs, and that, in our work we're really heavy on design. It's not a matter of finding some tools that you like that are whizzy that the students might like, or it's about designing the program from starting off. What do the students need? What do they know already? What are their skills already? And how do they learn? What are their learning styles? And so that's got to come right up front. So this wee girl here, she's sitting in front of a computer. She might be 3 years old. How can we provide for her in this environment? What can we do as designers, as teachers, to make sure that she gets the best experience possible?
So one of the big benefits of multimedia is cultural inclusivity. We just love this. There's a couple of real big benefits of both online learning and using multimedia, and I'm going to just give you a personal example here. So I was in a meeting with a couple of colleagues, one of whom was Pacifica, one was Maori. And it was one of those meetings where you had to say, okay, give your background and your skills and your expertise. And we went round and 5 of us spoke, and the Maori lady, obviously very uncomfortable, did do this. The Pacifica lady, my Pacifica colleague, burst into tears. She explained afterwards that you do what you do for your community. It is therefore your community who should speak on your behalf, and it is incredibly uncomfortable to blow your own trumpet. So you could imagine how multimedia, if she was able to ask permission from her community to video them while they are talking about her experiences, or even video herself doing some of these things, how much more comfortable would that be? And thinking about this for all of our students. Some students hate standing up and talking in front of a crowd. I mean, I find it very petrifying, but... So how can we make it more inclusive? How can we make learning less of a barrier and actually something that includes our learners?
So designing programs, it's really important to think about scaffolding and to obviously build on what students know, what Cisco calls schemas of understanding. And using the online connectivity, it can be done as a collaborative thing. It makes it a much richer experience for students when they're collaborating with other students and sharing what they know and building on that. We spent a lot of time in the 90s talking about media literacy, and we got into semiotics and we went all those things. But now we're having to face talking about digital literacy, because what we've discovered, and it's not rocket science, is that the best way to learn about this is to use it. So if students have the opportunities to be using these different tools, then they're going to learn not only the use, but the critical understanding of them. They're going to learn how to critique them, because then they can find out what they can and can't do, how they can and can't be used.
So moving on to the case studies, this was a research project that was carried out at Dubai Men's College. Dubai Men's College obviously is in Dubai, in the UAE. It's mainly Emirati males, 70% between the ages of 17 and 20 years old, but the remaining students are usually mature and working. It is a college that has from certificate up to bachelor's and a lot of vocational type qualifications. A couple of the problems that were faced at Dubai Men's College were the students were coming through from a very teacher-centred background, a lot of rote learning, a lot of assessment, and definitely not very much self-direction. The college was, all the teaching was done in English, and so they were coming into that sort of environment, and often their language skills weren't quite up to scratch. So the idea was, how did you build a foundations or freshman program that would scaffold these students all the way from this teacher-centred type dependency through to becoming much more self-directed learners. The research project was carried out over 3 years, had just under 600 students involved in the project. The design of the course itself used a lot of multimedia. One of the things we thought was, okay, we've got students coming in, some of them can't type, some of them don't know how to use computers, some of them are already programming them and creating flash objects. So how are we going to kind of mesh these whole range of skills? We put together a lot of screencasts with audio and with text call-outs, and with obviously the video behind. We also put together some videos that looked at some of the more esoteric concepts such as plagiarism, to really try and help students without putting text in the way and help them understand some of these concepts. Now, this is just, because I'm very aware of the time, this is just one of the results that we found from the students. We found students were much more motivated, but they, 83% of them out of the almost 600 did actually say that they found it useful when they could access the videos on WebCT when they wanted to, not just when the teacher was there available to take them step by step through things. Also, and I'll read this out for you, one of the students wrote, when we watch the video, it's funny when arguing with a friend about the topic, but still, the new ideas I got from my partner is useful and it's a new, creative way to learn, as was written. So very, very encouraging that the students recognise on a meta level what the multimedia was helping them with. Unitech, a little bit closer to home, in Auckland. Again, this time a wide range of ethnicities, but very much a vocational focus, all the way from certificate through to PhDs can be studied there. And we've been doing a lot with multimedia and mobile learning. I'll give you a couple of specific examples. We had a group in 2008 come over from Japan, and they were here to learn a little bit of English, a little bit of New Zealand culture, but also some specifics around economics and business. So we thought, great, these students coming on over, we're going to help them with their writing, with their listening, we're really going to help them build a community. So we thought we'd use Moodle as sort of a portal, but we'd use a lot of multimedia because English was obviously a bit of an issue. We'd get them to set up Flickr accounts and blogs, Vox blogs, so they could really blog their experiences and share some of their images and videos as well. Well, first week, all of the students are in the lab, and we've gone through how you might read a video. And then we got the students in front of the computers, and sure enough, they downloaded their videos and they watched them and streamed them. And then we realised all the students were doing was watching them. They weren't actually applying what was happening on the screen. So then we got the guy that was with them, we got him to translate what they should be doing into Japanese and explain it again. And kind of demonstrated with each of them, you watch a bit, you do what you're seeing. It was very difficult because the students didn't have the media literacy to understand exactly what we were requiring of them. So this is actually something to bear in mind, especially where with things like screencasts, you can make them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be valuable to your students. You have to bear in mind their media literacy levels. In comparison, we had a vet nursing course, and we were thinking, okay, the students are out on placement a lot. We'll encourage them to keep e-portfolios. They were going to use a wiki. We use PBWorks for the wiki. And the students who, again, didn't have very high ICT literacy skills, but were mainly from New Zealand. So we, again, made the screencasts, had all the students in the lab, and this time it was quite incredible. The students watched the videos, helped each other when they didn't understand things, asked the teacher if necessary, and then passed on the message to their peers. And by the end of a 2-hour session, every single student had a wiki set up, and every single student felt we did a bit of a survey at the end. It wasn't a formal study, but we did a survey at the end, and every student felt confident that they would be able to go away and use the wiki. So the comparison was sort of the background and the media literacy skills that they brought to this particular session and this particular situation. Something else that we've been helping with is some of our staff at Unitec. Sorry, I used to work at Unitec, so I forget to change the tense sometimes. For example, we've been working with automotive staff, and some of their students were coming in with low literacy skills, and especially around the necessity to have specific automotive vocabulary. So what we did was we put together some professional development sessions for the staff, and we used this sort of trade show approach. So at each of these little booths, staff could go along and play with some of the ideas. So it could be a tool, or it could be an approach, and there was somebody there who demonstrated, and they could ask lots of questions. Down the bottom here you'll see some links, so if you do go find this on SlideShare, you'll be able to go and see some of these things. So for example, in your left hand side, that's a reusable learning object around referencing, which is something that students needed to do, but obviously found some of the skills were quite difficult. So that's online, you can go and access it, and it's developed by University of Nottingham. What we did find with this particular type of approach, the staff felt more comfortable. We gave them a bit of a sandpit to try these things out, and then they felt much more comfortable about going and using these things with students.
So one of the key things in all this, I think, is that we've gone from students seeing academics as being figures of mystery to seeing themselves as part of an academic community. They might not use that word, that's sort of a bit of an egg-heady word, but they see themselves as part of an audience, part of a responsive community, able to critique, able to think deeply, able to contribute to the knowledge. And I think that's the big thing about this. And the more rich the experience they have, the more that actually is enacted, the more enabled they become. And there's an example of staff, reluctant staff perhaps, being dragged kicking and screaming by Diana, who's sitting there smiling in the third row, and learning to use ePortfolio. So there's a whole staff professional development thing that has to go alongside it in probably most institutions, I imagine. So the caveats, well, we heard quite a few of them this morning, they're always caveats, but our caveats, is the multimedia relevant to the task, or is it just whiz-bangy flash and we put it in there because the students will think it's fun? What's the context? Has it been designed so that the learning outcomes will be achieved? And are there digital literacy issues? So they're all things that you'll be familiar with in using this. And I love that dance image, and there was a dance image this morning, wasn't there, in the talk. I think, there is that sort of element of dance which is very the precision, but there's also the creativity and the joy of it too, I think.
I guess one of the reasons that we chose this particular image was just to get to the forefront to really highlight the notion of motivation, empowerment, and who is pushing and who is pulling and who's making the decisions. Yes, you do have to have the design there. Yes, you do have to have the scaffolding. You have to bear in mind various aspects such as digital literacies and ICT literacies. However, if you look at the real benefits, the empowerment of learners, the ability to be culturally inclusive, the ability to have students create the contents, to come on board, so the teacher becomes much more of a facilitator or a guide to the whole learning process. And the learner, in fact, starts to teach the teacher, that is your co-construction of understanding. And how wonderful is that? I went to Andrew Kirk's presentation yesterday, and he showed this wonderful video of students who, I think Helen referred to this earlier, they'd been given a computer and an internet connection. And it was what the students did, how they flourished. And again, these were disengaged students. And the image at the end of the student playing the piano, or that she'd learned these skills off YouTube. If she hadn't been given those opportunities, then she would never have been able to give the pleasure to her family or to herself that she otherwise had been able to. So what we'd like to do is just leave you with a couple of questions. They're quite open questions and relatively rhetorical. So thinking about online learning, thinking about creativity and enhancing that creativity, how can you help your students reach their learning goals? And the other question, and what steps can you take to enable this to happen? And do you want to? So thank you very much for listening. Do we have any questions? No questions? Thank you very much.
I'd just like to make a comment that I've experienced some work in the Middle East, and I use visually things to actually overcome the obstacle of language, because they were speaking in Arabic and I wasn't an Arabic person. We get little phrases, but pictures are amazing. They can break down everything. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've got it.
Yes.